Hello, Howlin' Hoover. This is Mr. Hain. This video goes along with our 3rd and 4th grade bird drawing project that we're going to be doing this week. You can pick any bird that you want to do. It can be one that's native here, where you go out in your backyard and you observe them and you draw them in your sketchbook or on paper. Or you can use the internet to look up a picture if it's a bird that's more exotic or not from around here. I'm going to be showing you how to draw and then shade it in with a pencil. But of course, if you want to use color, and use color pencils or markers or crayons, that's totally fine. Birds are great practice for our drawing skills because the form is relatively simple, but they also can be very dynamic with their wings out and when they're flying. And then, of course, their colorings can be really bold and beautiful. So there's a rich history behind drawing birds and painting them. So we're going to use that for inspiration when we draw our birds this week. The bird that I'm going to show you guys how to make, I found online, is little house wren here. So I'm going to kind of show you with the picture I have on my phone and then on the paper to kind of get our simplified forms before we start putting in the details. Okay, so let's get started. Bring you guys in here. Okay, so you can see this is the little picture I have found on my phone that I'm going to use when I make this example for this project. Okay, so let's get started. First, when I look at this, again, it's always about simplifying your forms when you start drawing. So if I zoom in here, I can see that there's a couple. This is a couple of simple shapes. This one I'm going to start with a circle for here for the head, and then the body is just another large circle followed by like a triangle shape for the tails. And then he actually has a very long beak for this little bird, so that's a long triangle. Okay, so when I start these, again, draw lightly. I'm going to draw darker just so you guys can see it on film. Okay, so when I start, again, making a circle shape for the head. Then when I look at this drawing too, you want to always reference your picture and what's going on with it. So when I look here, this curve from the head is kind of almost not a straight line, but it doesn't dip in here and come back out. It pretty much goes straight down here. So I want to make sure when I put my next circle in that I'm going to make sure that it kind of would fall in line with that. And in this part of its chest actually has quite a pretty pronounced dip here. So I want to make sure I block in that circle. I'm kind of putting that in the right place. And then here for the tail, again, right now it kind of comes down, and then there's a little bit of foreshortening with the tail that comes back here. Okay, and his beak, if you look at this direction of where he's looking, it's kind of going up this way. So I can lightly put that center line in and then know that his eye is going to be back here. Okay, very simple lines, simple forms to start. Then I'm going to go in and start blocking in more detail. If I look at where his eye is and compared to each side of his head, it's kind of almost right in the middle. So right here I'm going to draw a circle. The beak, the center line of the beak, lines up almost with the bottom part of the eye. See that if I was to connect this part to here? So I'd put that here, draw that out. The bottom part of the beak is relatively straight, and then the upper part has that curve that comes up. So then I'm going to go ahead in here. Now this part, this circle actually becomes relatively flat. So when I bring my beak in here, now that comes, again, it doesn't really dip in down here by the neck. It kind of just goes right into the body. This part comes down here. His chest comes out for his wings. Down like this. The wing line starts all the way up here, which is, if I follow the beak part, comes down here and kind of comes across here. Okay, so when I go in, I start to add the other details. Birds have a lot of important feathers and the direction of their feathers around their eyes. So I'm going to put my eye in here. I'm going to shade that in, give it a little bit of life. The feathers often grow in this direction, like around the eye. So I'm going to put those in. Looking at my bird that I've chosen to draw, Also has the feather markings that kind of come down away from the eye. So put those in. Now here, when it switches over from his head into his body, I want to make sure my lines are coming in that same direction, coming and ending around the body. Again, it's just going to make for a more believable drawing. So this one here, I have the back. Now for the feathers that start into the wing, I'm not going to draw every single one. I'm going to put this main one here, and then a second one, they're going to come here because his wing kind of folds over together with his other ones, but then also his tail feather is making up these bottom parts too. So now to give the pattern on the wings, when I look at it, he kind of has these almost banded light and brown stripes. They're kind of coming up. They're going to be subtle, and I can put those in with shading. But I put a few of those marks in here. Now for the feet, I want to look at, when I look back at my picture, use what you know from the picture. If I go from the bottom of where his body and his leg meet, if I draw a line straight up, it's somewhere about here where it's coming out of. So I'm going to start here. He has relatively long, thin legs. So I come down here. I have one toe and talon that come back here. Then I have one that, because of that branch he's on, is pretty big, and the talon is pushing his toe up. It's going to kind of go behind where I can't see it. And then there's a mark of a second one that's back here. So my edge of my branch is going to be here. I can't even see really the bottom in the picture, so I can just draw some bark in here. Now his other leg is all the way back here in the drawing, in the picture. So in my drawing, I want to make sure it's starting there. Again, one toe and talon here. The other one kind of goes behind the branch where I can't see it. And I can just draw my branch up here, draw one branch away, continue here, some marks for the bark. Okay? Now before I get into shading this, I'm going to go and erase unnecessary pencil lines. Just take my time. Now, when I shade this, you want to look for your dark areas. Like I know underneath his wing and his tail feather is pretty dark. So I'm going to just take my pencil. I'm kind of making my lines, going straight with them right now. But I can cross hatch, which is where you exactly that, where you cross your lines. Or I can do circles and smooth it in. I wouldn't go too dark to start because you can always darken it up, but a lot of times it's hard to erase it if you go too far. So I'm just going to kind of block in some of that shadow. Now for his head, I'm going to jump back up here. The eye, it's not really necessarily recessed into his head. So there's a slight section here where there's like a shadow where this part is actually kind of a little bit raised compared to here. So I'm just going to put that shadow in, kind of goes across here, those little lines. Now his beak, it is coming out of his head at not totally at the side. So I want to put a shadow underneath. And I'm going to continue that shadow underneath his head here because it's rounded. And if I make it darker where it comes in, it's going to make that more three-dimensional. So I'm going to shadow in here. Again, I'm going to put some shadows around the eyes. I'm going to shade the back of his head just a little bit. I know it's, again, the head goes in, almost into like the back here, but that's just from this view. If you were to be looking directly at the back of the bird, the body would be much wider than the head. So adding this shadow in here puts that head a little bit behind the body and again makes it a little more 3D. I'll lightly put in some color through the wings like this. Now what I want to do is decide which one of these bands is going to be dark. So I might start with this first one, shade in those lightly all in the same direction of my pencil lines. Now back here, again, it gets pretty dark behind because it's further away from us, it's in shadow. So I'm going to put my lines in. Now here, for the feathers, I'm going to kind of mark the underneath of each one, make those lines darker. And then I'm going to lighten up my pressure as I get further away from a lot of them to kind of give it some shape. Okay. Go in here. For the legs, I'm looking at that, especially in this front one. You can see there's a shadow that's on the back side. So I could do, and it's pretty small, so I might do like a little bit of circles, just kind of darken up that side here. And again, under the feet, just little lines to give some shadow where it's touching the bark. And this one in the picture, this leg's almost entirely in shadow, so I might just fill that in dark with my pencil. Then lastly, you can kind of look where the feathers are. These little lines that I make, if I shadow up to them, if I shade up to it and leave some of the area white that's in front of it, it's going to, again, play into looking more like feathers. And you also want to try to, towards the end of it, once you have a lot of your shading in, you want to put your lines in a direction of whatever object it is that you're drawing or shading. So if he has a rounded body, my lines should mimic that rounded shape. Okay, so like his wings rounded here, but then when it gets into these feathers, they come out this way, so my lines are going to be long this way. Here, it's rounded this way, so I can take my lines. You don't have to do it this way, but it really will allow that shape to come through and read more three-dimensional. Okay, so those are just some tips when you go to shade your bird with your pencil. You don't want to forget about the tree too. If I look at it in shadow, there would be some underneath here for sure, and you could spend a lot of time shading in your bark of your tree and your background. If I put a quick shadow here and maybe these grooves, make them dark, and then lighten up my pressure as I get further away, it's going to make our tree bark look a little more finished. If you want your tree bark and your tree branch to be less finished than a bird, that's fine too, just so your focus would then be on the bird. But okay, I'll be excited to see what you guys make. Have fun with it, and I'll see you next week.